Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner Stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I joined a dark web game where you can control a live contestant. I thought it was fake until the person started screaming my name. Alright, before I even get into this, I just want to say, I know how this sounds. Another dark web horror story, right? I get it. You've probably heard a million of them, and most of them are pure BS. If I were you, I wouldn't believe me either. But I swear, everything I'm about to tell you actually happened. And if you don't believe me, that's fine. Just don't go looking for this game. So, this all started about 6 months ago. I was bored out of my mind one night, scrolling through Reddit, watching random YouTube horror videos. You know, the usual deep dive into creepy internet rabbit holes. I was in this Discord server with some friends where we shared weird websites, ARGs, and unsettling stuff we found online. Nothing illegal or anything, just the kind of stuff that makes you feel like you're seeing something you shouldn't. One of the guys in the server, this dude named Zero, posted a link. No context, just, wanna play a game? This one's different. I hovered over the link, debating if I should even click it. It looked like some sketchy dark web URL, but I had a VPN and Tor browser installed, so I figured, why not? I've messed around on the dark web before, but mostly out of curiosity. I never bought anything or interacted with the creepy stuff. I clicked the link. The page that loaded was minimalistic, just a black screen with white text. Welcome to CRTL, a real-time interactive experience. Do you want to play? There were two options, yes or no. At this point, I assumed it was just another text-based horror game, like those old-school choose-your-own-adventure things. Maybe some edgy AI chatbot meant to scare you. So, of course, I clicked yes. A loading bar appeared, then a new message. Checking eligibility. The bar filled up slowly, like it was actually scanning something. That was already weird. How the hell was it checking anything? I hadn't even entered an email or username. But then, another message popped up. You have been selected. Your contestant is ready. Contestant? Now I was intrigued. The screen changed, and suddenly, I was looking at a live video feed. It showed a dimly lit concrete room. Small, no windows, just a flickering light bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the center of the room was a man. He looked about my age, early 20s, messy dark hair, wearing a plain white t-shirt and jeans. His hands were tied behind his back, and he was sitting on a metal chair. His face was bruised. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. The quality was too good to be fake. This wasn't some pre-recorded video. It was streaming live. And then another message popped up. Control panel activated. On the right side of the screen, a menu appeared with a list of actions I could choose from. At first, they were simple. Make him stand up, make him sit down, turn off the lights. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked, make him stand up. There was a short delay, maybe 1 or 2 seconds. But then, on the screen, the guy twitched. His head jerked slightly, like he had just been shocked, and then stiffly, he stood up. Okay, that was weird. I clicked, make him sit down. Again, the same reaction. A slight twitch, like an electric current had gone through his body, and then he slowly sat back down. I sat back in my chair, my pulse speeding up. What the hell was I looking at? Was this some kind of remote shock collar forcing him to obey? Was he an actor? Then the game gave me another prompt. Would you like to continue? I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to exit out right then and there, but the other part, the part that was still convincing itself this was some elaborate hoax, wanted to keep going. So, I clicked yes. New options appeared. These were different. Slap him. Make him scream. Give him a shock. I hesitated. My fingers hovered over the mouse. I wasn't about to torture some random dude, even if this was fake. But before I could do anything, the chat box at the bottom of the screen updated. A new message popped up, written in red text. Players are watching. Please engage. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was a counter in the corner of the screen. 142 viewers. Wait. What? I clicked on the number, and a list of usernames dropped down. People were watching this. Chat messages started flooding in. Do it. Shock him. Make him scream. Don't be a coward. My stomach clenched. This was real. Or at least, real enough that people were treating it like some sick game. I moved my mouse to exit, but before I could click out, the man on the screen suddenly lifted his head, his bloodshot eyes staring directly at me through the camera. And then, in a hoarse, broken voice, he spoke. He said my name, my real name. I slammed my laptop shut so fast, I nearly broke the screen. My heart was pounding. I hadn't entered any personal information. I hadn't logged in with an account. How the hell did they know my name? And worse, how did he? That should have been the end of it. I should have walked away. But of course, I didn't. Because later that night, I got an email. The subject line, "You can't quit now." And attached was a screenshot of me, sitting at my desk, taken from my webcam. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair, my laptop still closed, my body frozen in place. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely breathe properly. That email, that screenshot. How the hell did they do that? I didn't have my webcam turned on. I wasn't even using an account to access that site. It wasn't some random phishing scam. These people had actually hacked into my camera. They had been watching me. I wanted to believe it was fake, some well-executed scare tactic. But the longer I stared at that image, the more I knew. This was real. The photo was taken from the exact angle of my webcam, showing me hunched over my desk, staring at the screen in complete shock. The timestamp on the email, 2 minutes before I closed my laptop. Someone had been there, watching, recording. I ripped a piece of duct tape and slapped it over my webcam, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I should have unplugged my laptop entirely, but some morbid, sick curiosity kept me from doing it. Instead, I opened my phone and started searching. Dark web game controlling real people. I expected nothing but the usual creepypasta stories, but buried under Reddit threads and conspiracy forums, I found something. A post from 2017. The title, "Anyone else played CRTL? If so, get out now." My stomach clenched. I clicked on the post, my fingers trembling. The user had written a long, frantic rant about the exact same game I had just played. They claimed it started the same way. Anonymous invite, weird control panel, contestant following their commands. But then things escalated. I stopped playing when the choices got violent, but that's when the messages started. First, an email with a picture of me at my desk. Then, texts from an unknown number saying they were watching. I thought it was an empty threat until they sent a photo of my house, taken from my own front yard. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. I kept reading. I ignored them. I stopped replying. Then, 2 days later, my roommate went missing. I actually had to stop for a second and rub my face, trying to steady my breathing. I kept reading. He came back after 24 hours. I don't know where he was, but he wouldn't talk. He just locked himself in his room. When he finally opened the door, he had carvings all over his body. They had carved my username into his F-King chest. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry as hell. I don't know who they are. I don't know how they found me. But if you've played this game, if you've controlled someone, you're marked. They don't let you leave. They don't let you forget. The post ended with one final warning. Do not reply to their messages. Do not acknowledge them. Delete everything and walk away. I sat there, staring at the screen, my body paralyzed. I needed to stop. I needed to close my phone, wipe my laptop, and pretend this never happened. But before I could do anything, my phone buzzed. I looked down. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I just watched as my screen lit up over and over again. The first few calls went to voicemail. Then came the text. Answer. Answer now. We know you're reading this. I turned off my phone and launched my laptop, my mind racing. I was going to delete everything, clear my history, wipe my hard drive. Hell, I'd throw the whole thing in a dumpster if I had to. But as soon as I opened my browser, the game was already on my screen. I didn't even click anything. It was just there. The same black background, the same live video feed. Only this time, the contestant was gone. The chair was empty, the ropes cut. The camera was still running, still live, but the man I had controlled was nowhere to be seen. I swallowed, my entire body going numb. Then, a new message popped up. You failed to follow instructions. The game is not over. I tried to close the window. It wouldn't let me. I tried shutting down my laptop. It stayed on. Then, the screen changed. Another live feed. This time, of my own street. My stomach dropped so hard I almost threw up. It was my block. The camera was angled from the sidewalk, staring directly at my house. And then movement. A shadow stepped into frame. A man in a hoodie, standing perfectly still in front of my driveway. Then the chat exploded. He's here. Let him in. Let him in. Let him in. I slammed my laptop shut again, my breathing ragged. I wasn't waiting. I ran to my front door and double-locked it, then grabbed a kitchen knife with shaking hands. I peeked through the blinds. The street was empty. No one was there, but my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time, a picture. I opened it. It was my front door, taken from inches away. I don't know how long I stood there, gripping that knife, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No knocks, no sounds. Eventually morning came. The sun rose. The texts stopped. The game didn't come back. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over, until I went outside. My front porch was covered in scratches, deep, jagged marks, like someone had been clawing at my door. And in the center of it all, carved in deep, uneven letters, welcome to the game. I wish I could say I packed my bags, left town, and never looked back. That's what any rational person would have done. But if I had done that, if I had just disappeared, then maybe I wouldn't have found out the truth. Maybe I wouldn't have seen what was really happening behind that screen. I should have ignored everything. I should have shut my laptop down, smashed my phone, and run. But instead, I made the worst mistake of my life. I played again. The scratches on my door didn't just appear overnight. Something had been outside while I sat there, too afraid to move, listening to my phone vibrate over and over again. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a hacker screwing with me. Whatever was behind CRTL had been in my front yard, standing in the dark, pressing a knife or some sharp object into my door, carving those jagged letters, "Welcome to the game." I barely left my house for the next few days. I barely ate. Every little sound made my skin crawl. The creak of my floorboards, the wind against my windows. I slept with a knife under my pillow, waking up every hour to check the locks, my phone, my webcam. But they didn't send any more texts, no emails, no calls, just silence. And that's what scared me the most, because now I knew it wasn't some sick joke to them. They didn't have to remind me they were watching. They already knew I wouldn't forget. It was on the third day that the nightmare started. I was back on the site, staring at the live feed of the contestant. Only this time, he wasn't tied up. He was standing, still as a statue, in the center of the dark room. His face was pale, his lips slightly parted like he was whispering something. I leaned in. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. Then, slowly, his head snapped toward me. His eyes were black, not just dark, pitch black, like his pupils had swallowed everything around them. And then, without warning, he screamed. But it wasn't just noise. It was my name. Over and over again, a violent, distorted shriek. My name. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart hammering so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. But the worst part, I could still hear him. The scream didn't stop when I woke up. It was coming from my laptop. My screen was on. The game was open. The contestant was there, still staring, still screaming my name. I slammed my laptop shut, my hand shaking so bad I almost knocked it off my desk. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, anyone. And then I saw the notification. One new video message. The sender, unknown number. My stomach twisted into knots. I didn't want to open it. I didn't want to, but I did. And what I saw made my blood go cold. The video was grainy, black and white security footage, like it had been pulled from a street camera. The timestamp was 3:12 a.m., just 2 minutes ago. The footage showed my house, my driveway, my front yard, my bedroom light, still on. And then, from the right side of the frame, a figure walked into view, tall, thin, wearing a white mask. No features, just smooth, expressionless plastic. He moved slowly, his head tilting up toward my window, toward me. Then he stopped. For a moment, he just stood there, staring. And then, he raised his hand. Not a wave, not a threat. He pointed directly at the camera. Number. He pointed at me. I threw my phone across the room. I couldn't breathe. I was gonna be sick. My body felt like it wasn't mine anymore, like I was trapped inside my own skin, watching from the inside out. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even blink, because I knew he was out there, and I knew he'd be coming back. The next day, I finally snapped. I wasn't going to sit in my house and wait for this thing to come knocking. I needed answers. I needed to know who the hell was behind this. So I did something stupid. I went back on the site. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought there'd be some kind of contact information, an IP address, a forum thread, something I could trace back to the source. But when I logged in, the interface was different. There was no video feed, no live contestant, just a single option: enter observer mode. My mouth went dry. This was new. I hesitated. Then, before I could change my mind, I clicked it. The screen flickered. A new video feed appeared. Only this time, I wasn't watching some random concrete room. I was watching a live feed of someone's bedroom. A guy was sitting on his bed, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. What the hell was this? Was he the new contestant? Then a chat box opened. Messages started flooding in. Do it. Make him see. Make him play. A new menu appeared on the right side of the screen, the same as before. But this time, the options were different. Turn off his phone. Make him hear a sound. Send him a message. I felt like I was going to be sick. This was real. This was real. This guy had no idea he was being watched. He had no idea he was about to be dragged into the same nightmare. My hand hovered over my mouse. I wanted to close it. I wanted to shut my laptop and never look back. But then, the guy on the screen froze. His body went completely rigid. His face twisted into something that didn't even look human. His eyes bulged. His mouth opened wide in a silent, unnatural scream. And then, he turned his head. He looked right at the camera. Right at me. I shot back from my desk, knocking my chair over. My laptop screen started to glitch. The guy's face was warping, his mouth stretching too wide, his eyes too black. And then, my screen went dark. A single message appeared. You can't just watch. You have to play. My screen flickered again. And then, a new live feed opened, and my blood ran cold. Because this time, it was my own bedroom. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My own bedroom. That wasn't possible. But there it was. A live feed of my room. The exact same angle my webcam would be capturing. But the camera wasn't coming from my laptop. I knew because I was staring at my laptop, and it was shut. This feed, it was coming from somewhere else. I whipped my head around, scanning every inch of my room. The dim glow of my lamp flickered across my desk. My closet door hung half open. My blinds were drawn, but I could see the faint streetlights bleeding through the cracks. Nothing. No camera. No hidden device. But the feed was still live. It was showing me, sitting there, watching. Then the chat started flooding in. Look at him. He knows. He sees us now. He's next. A new option appeared on the screen. One I had never seen before. Enable control. My body locked up. I wasn't the player anymore. I was the contestant. I shot out of my chair, my pulse hammering so hard I thought I was going to black out. My breath came in short, choked gasps as I ripped open every drawer, every cabinet, every possible place someone could have planted a camera. Nothing. But the screen was still there, the chat still moving. Then, the cursor on my screen started moving, by itself. I watched in horror as my own mouse slid across the screen, hovering over the option, Enable Control. I grabbed my laptop, slammed it shut, and hurled it against the wall. The plastic casing cracked, the battery popped out, and the screen blinked black. Silence. Just my ragged breathing, my pounding heart, the faint hum of my ceiling fan. I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 10, 20. Nothing happened. I stood there for what felt like hours, barely breathing, barely blinking, just listening, waiting. The game was over. It had to be. But I should have known. They don't let you quit. At exactly 3 a.m., my phone vibrated. I hadn't touched it since I threw it across the room earlier. It was lying face down on my floor. The screen cracked from the impact. One notification. New message from unknown number. I didn't want to read it. I did not want to read it. But some sick part of me already knew what it was going to say. My hands trembled as I reached down, slowly turning the phone over. The message was just 2 words. Look outside. My stomach twisted into a knot. My fingers turned ice cold. I didn't want to. I really, really didn't want to. But I did. I walked toward the window, my knees weak, my head light. I reached for the blinds, heart slamming against my ribs, and then I pulled them open, my body locked up. Standing in my front yard, staring up at me, was a man. Number, not a man, something else. His face was completely covered by a mask, a smooth, featureless white surface, like porcelain. No eyes, no mouth, just blank, empty stillness. He stood perfectly still, hands at his sides, head slightly tilted, watching. No movement, no sound, just the cold, suffocating presence. And then he raised his hand and pointed, not at my window, not at my house, at my bedroom door. I felt the blood drain from my body. Number? No, no, no. I turned around so fast I almost tripped. My door was still closed, still locked. But then, I heard it. A click. The sound of my lock turning. From the other side. I lunged forward, grabbing the handle, slamming all my weight against it. The knob twisted violently, pulling against me. Someone was on the other side. Someone was inside my house. I threw my back against the door, bracing myself, pressing my feet against the floor as hard as I could. My chest heaved. My muscles burned from the pressure. And then, it stopped. The door didn't budge. The handle went still. Silence. I waited, listening. And then, knock, knock, knock. Slow, methodical. Then a whisper, right through the crack in the door. A voice. I knew. A voice I'd only heard once before. The contestant. Let me in. I nearly collapsed. My entire body started shaking so violently, I thought I was going to pass out. My mind was screaming at me to run, to get out, but my legs wouldn't move. Another knock. Another whisper. Please, let me in. I slammed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. This isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. But then, I heard the sound of something scraping against my door. Not knocking, not whispering, scratching. Slow, deliberate clawing, like fingernails dragging down the wood. I nearly threw up. I backed away, my breath coming out in short, broken gasps. I turned toward my window. The masked man was gone. Then, my phone buzzed again. I looked down, barely able to see straight. A new message. Open the door. I squeezed the phone so hard, my knuckles turned white. Number. I wasn't playing their game anymore. I wasn't playing. But before I could even think, before I could even breathe, the scraping stopped. The knocking stopped. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't move. And then, the doorknob started turning again. But this time, it wasn't locked. It turned all the way. The door creaked open, just an inch, and through the tiny suffocating gap, I saw an eye, bloodshot, wide, unblinking, staring right at me, and then, in that same hoarse, broken whisper, "You can't quit." I ran. I ran before the door could open, before I could see what was behind it, before I could find out what happens when you lose the game. I ran out of my house, into the street, barefoot, not even thinking, just running. And behind me, somewhere, in the dark, in the night, I heard laughter. I don't remember how long I ran. The streets were empty. The streetlights buzzed overhead, flickering in and out, like they were struggling to stay alive. I must have looked insane, barefoot, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a t-shirt, sprinting through the neighborhood like I was being chased by something I couldn't even see. But I wasn't running from a man. I wasn't running from a masked figure standing in my yard. I was running from the game, because I finally understood. There was no quitting. There was no winning. The second you clicked that link, you weren't just a player. You weren't just a spectator. You became a piece of it. And the game, it doesn't end. I don't know how I made it downtown. I barely realized where I was until I was standing in front of a 24-hour McDonald's, my chest burning, my legs trembling so bad I could barely stand. I stumbled inside, the smell of greasy fries and stale coffee hitting me all at once. A few drunk college kids were laughing in the corner, stuffing burgers into their mouths. A homeless guy was passed out in one of the booths. Normal. It all looked so fucking normal. Like the past few days hadn't even happened. Like I wasn't just running for my life from something I couldn't even explain. I walked up to the counter, my throat dry as hell. The cashier, a bored-looking girl with bright blue hair, stared at me, barely blinking. "You okay?" I opened my mouth. No sound came out. I tried again. My voice came out raw, barely above a whisper. "Do you have Wi-Fi?" She blinked. Yeah?" She pointed at the screen above the register. "It's free. The password's on the receipt." I ordered a black coffee, mostly so I could sit without getting kicked out, and grabbed a seat in the farthest booth. My hands were still shaking as I pulled out my phone and connected to the Wi-Fi. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought I could find someone, anyone, who had escaped the game. Someone who could tell me how to make it stop. But when my phone connected, I saw I had one new email. No sender, no subject, just an attachment, a video. I didn't want to open it. I really didn't. But my thumb moved before my brain could stop it. The video started playing. It was surveillance footage, black and white, grainy, no audio, but the timestamp, 3:22 a.m., just minutes ago. The camera was angled down at a long empty highway. No cars, no people, just dark, stretching pavement. At first, I thought they sent me the wrong file, that it was meaningless. And then, a figure walked into frame. My stomach turned to ice. It was me, barefoot, pale, eyes wide with terror, running. The exact moment I had been sprinting through the streets, gasping for air, thinking I was alone. But then, another figure stepped into frame, right behind me. My stomach lurched. Number. No. There was no one there. I had been alone. But on the video, I wasn't. The masked man. He was right behind me, walking slowly, casually, like he knew I couldn't escape. I slammed my phone face down on the table, my whole body seizing with cold, paralyzing fear. They were with me the whole time, watching, following, even when I couldn't see them. I sat in that McDonald's until the sun came up. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just stared at my coffee, watching it go cold, listening to my own heart pound in my ears. And then, my phone buzzed again. I didn't want to look, but I did. Another email. No sender, just a single sentence. Time to come home. I couldn't do this anymore. I had to leave, disappear. I walked outside, the early morning air sharp against my skin. The streets were still mostly empty, except for a few cars rolling through stoplights. And that's when I saw it. A white van, parked across the street. It had no plates, no company logo, just a plain white van sitting there, waiting. And in the driver's seat, a man, no mask, just a face I recognized. My breath caught in my throat. It was the contestant, the same guy from the game, the one I had controlled. He was staring right at me, and then, slowly, deliberately, He smiled. That's when I ran. I didn't stop to think. I didn't stop to breathe. I just ran. And behind me, the van's engine roared to life. I don't remember much after that. I ran until my legs gave out, until my vision blurred and my lungs burned like fire. I don't know where I am now. I don't use my real name. I don't stay in one place for too long. But no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, they find me. Sometimes it's a message, a phone call from an unknown number. Sometimes it's a video, a grainy black and white clip of me walking down the street, sitting in a diner, sleeping in my car. Sometimes it's just a knock on my door. 3 knocks, slow, deliberate, and then silence, like they're waiting for me to open it, like they already know that one day I will, because that's the thing about CRTL. Once you start playing, you can never stop. I paid a hacker to unlock a hidden section of Google Earth. The satellite image showed a massive building in the middle of the ocean. All right, I don't even know how to start this, but here goes. I'm not some conspiracy guy. I don't believe in aliens or shadow governments or any of that weird stuff. But I do like messing around with things I'm not supposed to mess with. That's how all this started. A few weeks ago, I was on a Discord server with some friends, just talking about random stuff. We got on the topic of Google Earth and how certain locations are blurred out or just straight up missing. You know, like military bases, secret islands, stuff the government doesn't want you to see. One of my friends, Nate, brought up something interesting. Dude, you ever notice how the ocean is, like, mostly empty on Google Earth? I hadn't thought about it before, but he was right. The ocean makes up, 70% of the planet. Yet, on Google Earth, there's barely anything out there. No ships, no deep sea structures, nothing but water. That's when I got an idea. What if there's something out there, but they just don't want us to see it? I joked. The thing is, I wasn't really joking, and the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to check. So, being the dumbass that I am, I went looking for ways to bypass Google Earth's restrictions. At first, I tried the usual methods, clearing layers, using historical imagery, even looking at old maps to see if anything had changed. But no matter what I did, certain areas remained censored. That's when I realized I was gonna need some outside help. I started searching on dark web forums, places you're not supposed to go unless you know what you're doing. I don't, by the way. But after a few hours of digging, I found a guy. His username was Zen or N, and his profile picture was just a black screen with a single white pixel in the middle. Super edgy. I sent him a message. Me. Hey, I'm looking to bypass Google Earth's restricted areas. Can you help? He replied in under a minute. Zenzoron. Depends. You got $500. That should have been my first red flag. Who just asks for money up front like that? But I was an idiot, and I was obsessed at this point. I sent him the money through Bitcoin, and within 10 minutes, he sent me a link. It was a custom-built program, a sketchy-looking .exe file with no name, just a long string of numbers. This will unlock hidden coordinates, he said. You'll see things they don't want you to see. I ran the program. At first, nothing happened. Then, Google Earth restarted itself, and suddenly, my screen started filling with red-marked locations all over the ocean. Some were small, some were massive, but one in particular caught my eye. A building, not an island, not a ship, a massive rectangular building, sitting dead in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was marked with a label in corrupted text, just a string of broken symbols, like something out of the Matrix. I zoomed in. The closer I got, the weirder it looked. The building wasn't normal. It had no windows, no clear entrance, just a flat, gray structure with a long black road leading from it into the water, like a landing strip for something that doesn't need to land. And then I noticed something else. There were people outside of it. At least, I think they were people. They were too tall, their limbs were too thin, and their heads, I swear to God, their heads weren't right. I blinked, and suddenly, Google Earth crashed. The whole program shut down, and when I reopened it, the coordinates were gone. The red markers, gone. The building, gone. I immediately messaged Zendron. Me. WTF, was that? No response. I waited. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nothing. Then, out of nowhere, a new message popped up. But it wasn't from Zendron. It was from an account with no name. Just a blank profile. No avatar. No history. And the message was just one sentence. Stop looking. That's when I realized I had made a mistake. A huge mistake. And that mistake was about to follow me into real life. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my chair, staring at my screen, refreshing my messages over and over, waiting for something, anything, from Zendron. But he never replied. The only thing left was that single, terrifying message from the blank account. Stop looking. I should have listened. I should have just dropped it and moved on with my life. But curiosity is a disease. It burrows into your brain, festers like an infection, and I was infected. I tried running the program again. Nothing. The map was back to normal. The coordinates were gone, like they had never existed. But I had seen them. I knew they were real, and I needed proof. So, I did the dumbest thing possible. I took a screenshot of the location before Google Earth crashed. It was blurry, distorted, but the numbers were still visible. I could make out the latitude and longitude. I copied them down and pasted them into a flight tracker website. And that's when things got weird. No commercial planes flew over that area. Not a single one. No cargo ships. No fishing vessels. Just a massive dead zone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, like a place that wasn't supposed to exist. I started looking up satellite images from different sources, NASA, NOAA, even some private weather companies. Every single one either blurred that area out or replaced it with a stitched-together patch of open ocean, like someone had manually erased whatever was there. That's when my phone buzzed. A private number. At first, I ignored it. Probably spam. But then it rang again. And again. And again. Finally, I answered. I didn't even get the chance to say hello before a voice cut through the speaker. Low. Mechanical. Almost like it was being filtered through some kind of software. You need to stop. My stomach turned to ice. Before I could respond, the call ended. I sat there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My brain was screaming at me to shut my laptop, turn off my phone, go to sleep, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But then, a notification, an email, no subject, no sender, just a blank name. I hesitated before opening it, and when I did, my blood went cold. Attached was a photo, a screenshot from a security camera. The timestamp said it had been taken 4 minutes ago. It was my apartment door. I froze. My hand started shaking. I turned off my monitor, the glow of the screen burning into my vision. My room was completely dark, except for the dim light from the street outside. I listened. Silence. Then, the faintest sound. A tap. Barely audible, but unmistakable. A single, deliberate tap against my front door. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. I reached under my desk and grabbed the baseball bat I kept for protection. My fingers felt numb against the cold metal. Slowly, I stood up and crept toward the peephole. I held my breath and looked. At first, I saw nothing, just the dimly lit hallway, the flickering fluorescent light above my door. But then, a shadow moved, a figure, just out of view, standing close enough that I could hear their breathing through the door. Slow, steady, controlled. Whoever they were, they knew I was watching. Then, something slid under the door. A small, white envelope. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, gripping the bat so hard my fingers ached. Eventually, I forced myself to kneel down and pick it up. The paper was rough, like cheap printer paper. There was no name, no address, just a single piece of paper inside, with one sentence printed in bold black letters. Final warning. That was it. No threats, no explanations, just those 2 words. I snapped. I ripped open the door, swinging the bat like a madman, ready to bash in the skull of whoever was standing there. But the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no closing doors, just silence. Whoever had been there was gone. I stood frozen in the doorway, my own ragged breathing echoing in my ears. Then I saw it. A black car parked across the street. Not just any car, one of those government-looking SUVs, completely blacked out windows, engine running. I locked eyes with the silhouette in the driver's seat, and that's when the car's headlights flicked on. Not in an aggressive way, not like a warning, more like a reminder, a silent way of saying, "We see you. We know where you live. We know what you're doing. And if I didn't stop, they were going to make me stop." I don't remember going back inside. I don't remember locking the door. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the floor, still clutching the envelope, staring at my laptop screen like it was the source of all my problems. And in a way, it was. Because despite everything, the call, the email, the man outside my door, the SUV watching my apartment, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only scratched the surface, that whatever was out there, hidden in the middle of the ocean, was something I wasn't supposed to see, something no one was supposed to see. And yet, I still wanted to know. I still wanted to see more. I should have just turned off my computer. I should have just let it go. But I didn't. I opened a new tab, typed in the coordinates, and pressed enter. And what I found next, it was the worst mistake of my life. I should have stopped. I should have shut my laptop, thrown my phone in the trash, and moved on with my life. But there's something about knowing you're not supposed to know something that makes it impossible to walk away. It's like staring at a locked door in a burning building. Every rational part of your brain is screaming at you to leave, but you just have to see what's on the other side. I typed in the coordinates again. At first, nothing happened. Google Earth loaded as usual, just an endless, empty stretch of the Pacific. No markers, no buildings, just water. I felt my stomach sink. Maybe I really had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was just going crazy. But then, my screen flickered. For a split second, I saw something. A flash of distorted pixels, like an image trying to load, but failing. Then, the entire program crashed again. Only this time, something new happened. A video window popped up. It wasn't from Google Earth. It wasn't from any program I recognized. It was just there. A black screen, a small loading symbol spinning in the center. And then it started playing. At first, it was just grainy black and white footage, like old CCTV security cam footage. The camera was positioned high up, looking down at something massive, metallic, and flat. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. It was the roof of a building in the middle of the ocean, the same one from before. My breath hitched. The footage was live. Then the camera switched feeds. Now it was inside. It was a long, narrow hallway, sterile white walls lined with flickering fluorescent lights. No windows, no doors, just an endless corridor stretching forward into the dark. The entire place had this unnatural stillness to it, like a hospital without patients. Then a figure appeared. I felt my entire body lock up. It moved into view from the right side of the screen, a tall, thin silhouette, wearing some kind of tattered jumpsuit. Its head was wrapped in bandages, only its mouth exposed, a set of black, rotting teeth, lips pulled back in a frozen grin. I watched, completely frozen, as it twitched forward, its limbs jerking unnaturally, like a glitch in reality. Then the feed switched again. A new room. This one was worse. It looked like an observation chamber. Thick glass walls, lined with metal restraints. And inside, there was a person. A real person. A man, sitting in a chair, his wrists and ankles bound. His clothes were soaked. At first, I thought it was sweat, but then I saw the red pooling under his feet. Blood. His head was slumped forward, but I could see his chest rising and falling. He was still alive. Then, something moved behind the glass. A second figure. Not human. Tall. Too tall. At least 8 feet. Its arms were too long, its fingers dragging across the floor as it moved. No clothes, no hair, just smooth, grayish-pale skin, stretched impossibly tight over its frame. Its head was featureless, except for a single slit where its mouth should have been. Then, the man in the chair lifted his head, and I'll never forget what I saw. His eyes were gone, not missing, surgically removed. Just 2 empty black sockets, staring forward in blank, frozen terror. His lips started moving, whispering something I couldn't hear. But the thing behind the glass, it understood. It tilted its head, its mouth slit stretching open in a way that shouldn't have been possible. And then, the feed cut out. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the black screen. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely keep them on the keyboard. I wanted to believe it was fake, some elaborate deep web horror show. But I knew, I fucking knew, what I had just seen was real. And then, something even worse happened. The black screen glitched. New text appeared. A countdown timer. 0, 0, 0, 4, 59, 0, 0, 0, 4, 58, 0, 0, 0, 4, 57. I felt a chill crawl down my spine. I didn't know what the timer was counting down to, but I knew I didn't want to be sitting here when it hit 0. I slammed my laptop shut and yanked the power cable from the wall. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. I needed to get out. I needed to leave. But then, my phone buzzed. A single text message. From no number. Just one word. Run. I didn't think. I grabbed my backpack, shoved my laptop inside, and bolted for the door. As soon as I stepped into the hallway, I saw something move down the corridor. A shadow. Tall. Thin. Wrong. I ran. I didn't wait to see what it was. I sprinted down the stairs, out into the cold night air. The black SUV was gone, but I didn't care. I needed to get somewhere. Anywhere. Safe. I ran to the nearest place I could think of. A fucking McDonald's. I burst through the doors, sweating, breathless, looking like I had just seen a ghost. The cashier, some bored teenager, just blinked at me like I was a lunatic. I didn't care. I found a seat in the corner, back against the wall, eyes on the entrance. My phone buzzed again. A new text. You shouldn't have seen that. I swallowed hard. My hands felt numb. Another message. They're already looking for you. My pulse stopped. A third message. Get somewhere crowded. Stay in the light. I looked up at the fluorescent glow of the McDonald's interior. Bright, crowded, safe. Or at least, that's what I thought. Until I looked out the window and saw the man in the black hoodie standing across the street, facing the McDonald's, facing me. And then he smiled, a slow, unnatural grin, and my phone buzzed one last time. A final message. You don't have much time left. The man in the black hoodie never moved. He just stood there, across the street, staring at me through the glass of the McDonald's window. He didn't blink. He didn't shift his weight. Just stood, completely still. And then he tilted his head, like he was listening to something. I felt my stomach drop. I looked around the restaurant, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The place was busy. Families, college kids, truck drivers grabbing a late-night meal. But none of them noticed him, like he wasn't even there. I turned back to the window, and he was gone. The street was empty. The moment my brain registered that, my phone buzzed again. A new text. Too late. I didn't even have time to react before the lights in the McDonald's cut out. All of them. 1 second, I was sitting in a brightly lit restaurant, surrounded by people. The next, I was drowning in pitch black darkness. Then, the screaming started. It wasn't just panic. It was something else. Something wrong. I fumbled to grab my phone, shaking fingers stabbing at the screen for the flashlight. The second I turned it on, my stomach flipped. The people were gone. Every single person that had been in the McDonald's just seconds ago vanished. The booths were empty, the registers abandoned, half-eaten meals still steaming on the tables, like they had been erased from existence. But I wasn't alone. Something was breathing behind me, long, shuddering, like something trying to remember how to breathe. I turned slowly. The beam of my phone flashlight flickered over the counter, the drink machines, the self-serve kiosk, and then it landed on them. A figure stood in the darkness, just behind the counter. Tall, too tall, arms too long, fingers hanging past its knees, skin like wet leather, stretched too tight over an impossibly thin frame. Its head was tilted, like it didn't quite understand what it was looking at. Then, it moved, not stepped, glitched, like a bad video file skipping forward, one frame at a time. It was closer now. I couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Then, it opened its mouth. I expected teeth, a jaw, something human, but there was nothing inside. Just a black void. Then, it spoke, and the sound that came out wasn't a voice. It wasn't words. It was static. A buzzing, screeching, radio-static noise, pouring from its mouth like a fucking broken signal. And then, I felt something grab my wrist. Cold, wet, like flesh soaked in ice water. My phone hit the floor. The flashlight spun wildly, throwing broken shadows across the empty restaurant. Then, I was dragged backwards. I don't remember what happened next. I remember falling, my body hitting something hard. I remember a noise, metal grinding against metal. I remember my own voice screaming. Then, nothing. When I woke up, I was somewhere else. Not outside, not in the McDonald's, underground. The air was wet, thick with the smell of rust and seawater. I was lying on cold metal, a floor. A grating sound filled the air, distant, mechanical, like something huge was shifting overhead. I tried to move. My body screamed in protest. My wrists and ankles were raw, like I had been restrained. I pushed myself up. My vision was still spinning, but I could make out my surroundings. A room. No, a cell. The walls were metal, bolted together like a ship's interior. The only light came from a single, flickering fluorescent panel in the ceiling. I tried to stand. My knees buckled. Then, a sound. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Coming down a metal hallway outside my cell. A shadow passed in front of the door. Then, it stopped. Right outside. I held my breath. The door was solid steel, with a tiny grated viewing slot. I saw something move behind it. A hand, long fingers wrapping around the edge. Then, a whisper. A voice, muffled through the metal. "You're not supposed to be here." Then, the lock slammed open. The door swung wide, revealing a long, narrow hallway. More metal, more flickering lights. But no one was there. I forced myself to move, dragging my aching body forward. The hallway stretched in both directions. No signs, no markings, just identical doors, bolted shut. Then, I heard it. A distant voice, muffled, desperate, coming from one of the rooms. I staggered toward it, every step feeling like my legs were made of lead. The voice got clearer. A woman, sobbing. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. "Please, please don't." Then, a sound I will never, ever forget. A wet, tearing noise, like flesh being pulled apart. A scream ripped through the metal. Then, silence. I backed away. My entire body was shaking. Then, I felt eyes on me. I turned. At the end of the hallway, a figure was watching me. Not human. Tall. Too tall. Its bandaged face twisted into a grin. And in its hand, a scalpel. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. The hallway stretched on forever. The lights flickered erratically, casting warped shadows that moved on their own. Then, I found a stairwell, leading up. I took them two at a time, lungs burning, heart hammering against my ribs. The air grew colder. The metal wall shook. I burst through a final door, and suddenly, I was outside. A rooftop, the building, the one from Google Earth. I was here. And then, I saw the ocean, and my mind broke, because the water wasn't moving. Not a single wave, not a single ripple, like the entire ocean was frozen in place. Then, a shadow moved beneath it. Something huge, something watching me, something waiting. Then, a siren blared, and I heard them. Hundreds of footsteps, coming up the stairs, coming for me. And there was nowhere left to run. The sirens wailed like dying animals. The whole building shook beneath my feet. I stood on the rooftop, staring at the impossible ocean, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The water was still, a perfect, glass-like black that stretched to infinity. And underneath, something was moving. A shadow, impossibly huge, shifting in the depths below. I heard the footsteps getting closer, hundreds of them, a rhythmic, inhuman stomping, all moving in perfect unison. I turned toward the stairwell door, and they were there, lined up, watching me. A dozen, no, 100 figures stood in the open doorway, blocking my escape. Each one wrapped in bandages, their faces frozen in twisted, toothy grins. Their eyes, gone, just empty, bleeding sockets staring straight at me. Then, they spoke, not with words, not with voices, but with static. A crackling, hissing chorus of white noise spilling from their mouths like a broken transmission. And in that static, I heard something else, something behind the noise. A message, a command. "Get on your knees." My body locked up. I felt my knees bend on their own. My hands trembled, but I couldn't control them. My body wasn't mine anymore. Bow! I felt myself falling forward. My forehead hit the cold metal of the rooftop. And then, the ocean moved. The entire surface, smooth as glass just seconds ago, began to shift. A massive, dark mass rose from beneath the water. Not a creature, not a ship. Something worse. Something that should never exist. A head. At least it looked like a head. A vast, featureless mound of flesh, stretching miles wide, rising from the ocean like a mountain. Its skin was pale, slick with black liquid that dripped back into the sea. And then, it opened its mouth. There was no jaw, no teeth, just a single cavernous hole, stretching wider and wider until it was all I could see. The inside wasn't flesh, it was a void, an endless, hungry darkness that swallowed the sky itself. And I knew, deep in my bones, it was looking at me. Then, the bandaged figures spoke again. Give yourself to it. My body moved on its own. I stood up. I walked forward, step by step, toward the edge of the rooftop, toward the impossible ocean, toward it. I fought. I screamed. But my body wasn't listening. I reached the edge. The wind whipped around me. The water was miles below, but I knew if I jumped, if I let go, I wouldn't hit the surface. I would fall forever into that mouth, into that void. I looked back, and I saw him, the man in the black hoodie, standing behind the bandaged figures, watching, and for the first time, he moved. He lifted his hand, and he pointed at me. Then, he smiled and whispered a single word. Jump. And I did. I was falling, but there was no wind, no gravity, no end, just falling. The world around me stretched, pulling into impossible angles, warping into something my brain couldn't comprehend. The further I fell, the less human I felt. Then, the whispering started. 1,000 voices, 1,000,000, all speaking at once. Some I recognized. A teacher from elementary school, my mother, the cashier at the McDonald's, all whispering the same thing. You were never supposed to see this. I hit the water, or at least I thought I did, because I didn't stop falling. I fell through the ocean like it wasn't even there, and below me, a city, not ruins, not shipwrecks, a functioning city, built from metal and bone, stretching across the ocean floor, towers with windows, and behind those windows, people, number not people, things that used to be people. They watched me fall, silent, motionless, waiting. Then, I saw it, the thing in the city's center, bigger than a skyscraper, a tower of flesh, pale, pulsing, with faces, thousands, millions of human faces, fused together, stretching, screaming soundlessly, their mouths moving in an agonized, endless chant, begging, pleading, don't let it take you. And then, I stopped falling. The city rushed up to meet me, and I woke up. I was in my bed, in my apartment, like nothing had happened, like it was all a dream, but it wasn't, because when I turned on my laptop, Google Earth was still open, and there, in the middle of the ocean, the building was gone, nothing but empty water, like it had never been there, and in my inbox, one final email, no sender, no subject, just a single image, a satellite photo, not of the ocean, not of the building, of me, taken from above, standing on the McDonald's rooftop, looking up, and behind me, a black shape, tall, too tall, with a mouth stretched too wide, smiling, and below the image, one final message. You brought it back with you. And then, the lights went out. I downloaded a haunted podcast from the dark web. The host started describing my bedroom in real time. Alright, before I even get into this, let me just say, I'm not some tech wizard or hacker. I'm just a normal guy who made a really, really bad decision. And if you're reading this, I need you to promise me one thing. Do not go looking for this podcast. I know that sounds like the kind of thing someone says just to make you more curious, but I swear to you, if I could go back in time and undo everything, I would. So, let me back up. I work a pretty boring remote IT job, which means I spend way too much time on my computer. When I'm not fixing some old guy's printer or resetting passwords for people who still use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as their login, I'm usually just scrolling through Reddit, YouTube, and occasionally some weird corners of the internet. You know the ones. I don't mess with anything illegal, but I have a bad habit of chasing down creepy internet mysteries, those unexplained websites, lost media rabbit holes, and disturbing YouTube videos that disappear after a few hours. So, when a guy in a Discord server I'm in mentioned something called the ghost frequency, I was immediately interested. It's like a podcast, but way creepier, he said. The episodes just show up on random sites. No one knows who makes them. That was all it took for me to start searching. At first I found a couple of mentions on conspiracy forums. People talking about how it was some kind of ARG, or maybe an art project. Some claimed it was cursed, but you hear that kind of thing about everything online. It wasn't until I dug into an old sketchy message board that I found an actual link. It was buried inside a post from 2014, just a short line of text that said, "Do not listen alone." The link didn't go to a regular website. It opened a black screen with a single download button labeled episode 44.mp3. No description, no info about the creator. Just that. Now, any normal person would have noped out right there. But me? I figured, what's the worst that could happen? So I downloaded it. The file was weirdly small, only about 20 minutes long. When I hit play, it started like a normal podcast, static, then a low voice speaking in that eerie, slow way that horror narrators do. Welcome back to the ghost frequency. The host's voice was deep and quiet, like he was speaking directly into my headphones. This is episode 44, recorded in a place you know well. Something about that phrasing made me pause. A place I know well? I glanced around my room. Just my desk, my bed, some posters. Nothing out of the ordinary. The host continued, his voice smooth and calm. Tonight, we talk about the spaces you think are safe. Your home, your bedroom, the four walls that surround you, where you sleep, where you're listening right now. A chill ran through me. I suddenly felt way too aware of my surroundings. I turned in my chair, half expecting to see something behind me. Nothing. The host chuckled softly, like he knew I had just done that. "You don't need to check," he said. "Not yet." I laughed nervously. Okay, that's actually creepy. I kept listening. He started telling a story. Something about an old house in the 1800s where a man disappeared without a trace. The details were unsettling, but nothing crazy. Then, about 10 minutes in, the host suddenly stopped. There was silence. Then he whispered, "I like your posters." My stomach dropped. I froze. I wasn't streaming this. My webcam was covered. My mic was muted. But somehow, this voice, this recording, just commented on something in my room. I ripped my headphones off. My heart was pounding. I sat there staring at the screen, my hands shaking. No way. That's impossible. It had to be a coincidence, right? Maybe it was part of the recording. Maybe a ton of people had posters in their rooms. I swallowed hard and slowly put my headphones back on. The host's voice came through, calm as ever. "Still here?" I almost threw my laptop across the room. I slammed the spacebar, stopping the audio. My breath was coming in short gasps. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the silence in my apartment. And then, knock, knock, knock. My entire body locked up. The sound had come from my bedroom door. I live alone. The knocking didn't stop. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't aggressive. It was slow, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. Like someone knew I was inside, frozen in place. Like they were waiting for me to react. I couldn't move. My hands were gripping the edges of my desk so hard my knuckles went white. My body was stuck in this horrible state between fight and flight. But I couldn't do either, because I live alone. There shouldn't be anyone on the other side of that door. I swallowed hard and forced myself to turn my head, just enough to glance at my bedroom door. The handle didn't move. The knocking didn't come again. Silence. My apartment was dead quiet, the kind of quiet where your own breathing feels too loud. I waited, counting the seconds in my head. 5, 10, 15, nothing. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe my brain was playing tricks on me after that messed up podcast. I forced myself to move, slowly, carefully, quietly. I stood up from my chair and crept toward the door, every muscle in my body screaming at me to stop. I pressed my ear against the wood. Silence. But then, the doorknob turned. Not fast. Not like someone trying to force their way in. Just turning. As if whoever was out there wanted to see if it was locked. I stumbled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. I hadn't locked it. Why didn't I lock it? My hand shot out and twisted the lock, just as the handle finished turning. Click. The second the lock engaged, everything went still. I stood there, my chest rising and falling in sharp, panicked breaths. Then, from the other side of the door, I heard breathing. Slow, deep, just on the other side. I swear I could hear them smiling. I backed away until my legs hit the edge of my bed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to call someone, anyone. But my phone was still on my desk, next to my laptop, next to the podcast. The podcast. I don't know why, but I turned my head toward the screen. The audio file was still paused at 13:07, and then it unpaused itself. A soft hiss of static filled my headphones. Then the host's voice returned, smooth as ever. "You locked the door." My stomach dropped. I watched, paralyzed, as the timestamp on the audio file jumped forward in real time. The host let out a low chuckle. "Smart, but that won't help you." I slammed my laptop shut. The audio stopped, but the feeling didn't. The feeling of being watched. I turned back toward the door. The breathing was gone. I don't know how long I stood there. 5 minutes? 10? I finally got the courage to move, grabbing my phone and calling the only person who made sense. My neighbor, Jake. Jake lived in the apartment across the hall. We weren't exactly best friends, but we talked sometimes. The phone rang once, twice. Then he picked up. "Yo, what's up?" His voice was groggy, like I just woke him up. I checked the time. 2:32 a.m. "Jake," I whispered. "There's someone outside my apartment." That woke him up fast. "What? Are you sure?" I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. "Yeah." They knocked, tried the handle, but when I locked the door, they just stood there. Jake was silent for a second. Then he said something that made my blood go cold. "Dude, I just got home like 10 minutes ago." I blinked. What? I literally just walked past your door. No one was there. I felt sick. That wasn't possible. It wasn't possible. But I knew what I heard. Stay on the phone, Jake said. I'll come check it out. I didn't want him to. I didn't want anyone to open that door. But at the same time, the thought of him just standing out there alone made my skin crawl. I heard him leave his apartment. His footsteps echoed down the hall. I held my breath. A pause. Then, dude, there's no one here. I let out a shaky exhale. My legs finally gave out, and I sank onto my bed. You sure? I whispered. Yeah, he said. Your hallway's empty. No one could have walked past me without me seeing them. I wanted to believe him. I really did. All right, I said. Thanks, man. Then he interrupted me. Wait. Silence. Jake? A pause. Then, very quietly, he said, Your door. My body went rigid. What about it? I whispered. Another pause. Then, there's something on it. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know. But my mouth moved before I could stop it. What? A second later, my phone vibrated. A photo. I hesitated. My fingers felt numb as I swiped to open it. Jake had taken a picture of my door, and on it, right at eye level, was a single word, etched into the wood, like someone had carved it in with their fingernails. It just said, Listen. I stared at the photo for so long, my vision blurred. The word listen was etched into my door, like something had scratched it into the wood with jagged, splintered nails. The grooves were deep, uneven. It hadn't been there before. I knew that for a fact, because I had stared at that door when I locked it. Jake's voice crackled in my ear. Dude, what the hell is this? I swallowed, my throat dry as sandpaper. I don't know, I whispered. I heard movement on the other end of the line, Jake shifting uncomfortably. Okay, just open the door, man. Let me in. My body locked up. Something about that sentence, open the door, made every muscle in my body scream at me to do the opposite. I didn't move. Jake knocked. Once. Twice. Dude? You good? I squeezed my phone so hard I thought it might crack. Something felt wrong. It wasn't just the word carved into the door. It wasn't just the podcast. It was the way Jake sounded. His voice was slightly off, like he was too close to the mic, like I could hear something behind him. A faint, whispering breath. I licked my lips, took a shaky step toward the door. Then, without even thinking, I asked, What's my name? Silence. A long, unnatural silence. Then Jake let out a short, nervous laugh. Dude, what? I felt my stomach tighten. My fingers twitched near the lock. Just say my name, I said. My voice sounded wrong. Thin. What's my name? Another pause. Then, come on, man. Stop messing around. I felt it. I felt the cold pressure on the other side of that door. The weight of something standing there. Listening. I wasn't talking to Jake. Whatever was standing in the hallway wasn't him. My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped back. My skin felt too tight, like my body was trying to crawl away from itself. A breath crackled through the speaker. Then, very quietly, a voice that was almost Jake's whispered, Let me in. I hung up so fast, my fingers barely worked. The second the call cut out, the knocking started again. Harder this time. Faster. Slam. 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 I backed up, tripping over my desk chair, crashing to the floor. My head smacked against the hardwood, stars bursting in my vision. The walls shook. The door frame rattled. Slam, 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 slam. Then, silence. Nothing. No breathing. No knocking. Just stillness. I stayed on the floor, chest heaving. And then, click. My laptop turned on by itself. The screen flickered to life, bathing my room in cold blue light. I barely had time to react before the ghost frequency started playing. Not from the beginning. It skipped forward, way forward, to the very last 2 minutes of the recording. The host's voice came through my speakers, louder than before. "Why won't you open the door?" I shook my head violently, scrambling away from the laptop. My breath came in quick, sharp gasps. The host laughed, a soft, low chuckle. "You can still hear it, can't you?" he whispered. The breathing, the scratching, the sound of nails against the wood. I clapped my hands over my ears. "Shut up! You should listen." "No!" And then, the sound came through my laptop speakers, a wet, gasping inhale, like something was right behind me. I threw my laptop across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack, the screen shattering, sparks flying. The audio cut out. My entire body was shaking. I sat there, staring at my broken laptop, my mind blank with terror. And then, my phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I nearly screamed. "Jake." I hesitated. My hands were slick with sweat as I picked up. "Dude," he sounded out of breath. "Dude, are you okay? What the hell just happened?" I opened my mouth, but no words came out. "Listen, man, I don't know what's going on, but He let out a ragged breath. "I just woke up." My stomach dropped. "What?" I passed out, man. I don't even remember coming home. I just woke up in my apartment like 5 minutes ago." I felt sick. Jake kept talking, but I wasn't listening anymore, because I looked at my door, and there, right beneath the first word, "Listen," was a second word, freshly carved. "Open!" I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared at the second word carved into my door. "Open!" The cuts were fresh, sharp, jagged slashes in the wood. Splinters curled around the edges like torn flesh, like something had clawed the letters into the surface with raw, broken fingers. I heard Jake's voice in my ear, distant, muffled. "Dude, are you still there?" But I couldn't answer, because I knew one thing for sure. Something had been in my apartment. Not outside, inside. I felt it in my bones, in the heavy, suffocating wrongness in the air. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and did the only thing I could think of. I called 911. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then the line clicked. For a second, there was silence. Then, a voice. Not the dispatcher, not a person, just a wet, rasping inhale, right into my ear. I dropped my phone. My body locked up, every nerve screaming. The sound kept going. Slow, uneven breathing. And then, a whisper. "You should open the door." I lunged forward and slammed my phone against the floor, shattering the screen. The call cut out instantly, but the words hung in the air. I felt them like cold fingers against my skin. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my bed. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought it might burst. This wasn't just some creepy podcast. This wasn't just weird audio tricks or a prank. Something wanted me to open the door. Something that knew I was listening. I turned, grabbed the lamp from my nightstand, and swung it at my bedroom window. Glass exploded outward. Cold air rushed in. My hands were slick with sweat and shaking so hard I almost dropped my phone as I climbed up onto the windowsill. I didn't care that I was on the second floor. I'd rather break my legs than open that door. Then, from behind me, a single knock. Software, gentle, like someone was knocking with just the tip of their finger. I turned my head just enough to glance over my shoulder, and for the first time, I saw it. It stood in the dark corner of my room, just outside the glow of my shattered laptop screen. Tall, thin, wrong. Not a person, not even close. Its limbs were too long, its skin stretched too tight over bones that jutted at unnatural angles. Its head was tilted, swaying slightly, like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. And its fingers, Jesus Christ, its fingers, they were raw, bloody, torn down to the bone, from scratching, from carving. I made a sound, a sharp, choking gasp, and it snapped its head toward me. I saw its eyes, or the holes where its eyes should have been, empty, black pits. And then it grinned. My body moved before my brain could even process it. I twisted and threw myself through the open window, landing hard on the pavement below. Pain shot up my legs, my ankle twisting violently. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I stumbled to my feet and ran. I didn't go back to my apartment. Not that night. Not the next night. Not ever. I crashed on Jake's couch for a few days, barely speaking, barely sleeping. When he finally went to check on my place, he found the door wide open. The inside was trashed, furniture overturned, scratches gouged into the walls, my laptop gone. But the worst part, the thing that still keeps me up at night, the recording. Jake found my phone under my bed. The screen was shattered, but the voice memo app was open, and there was a single audio file. It was 9 hours long. Jake played the first few seconds. It was just static at first. Then, the sound of something breathing, and in the background, a voice, low, whispering, singing, over and over in that same slow, eerie voice. You should have listened. You should have listened. You should have listened. Jake only listened to the first few minutes of the recording before he turned it off. I don't blame him. But me? I couldn't ignore it. Something inside me was screaming not to listen, but I had to know. I had to understand what had happened to me. So, later that night, when Jake was asleep, I grabbed my busted phone and my headphones. I sat on the floor of his bathroom, locked the door, and pressed play. The file started the same way Jake described, static, breathing, and then singing. A voice too deep, too slow to be human, crooning the same words over and over like some broken music box. You should have listened. The audio hissed, warped, glitched. The breathing came in heavy, ragged bursts. And then the voice changed, no longer singing, now speaking. I see you. I stopped breathing. It wasn't a recording anymore. It wasn't a file left behind. It was speaking to me. Right now. Live. I almost dropped the phone, but my fingers were locked around it in a death grip. I wanted to stop. I wanted to throw the phone into the sink, turn on the water, and let it drown. But I didn't, because the voice kept talking. You ran. A sharp crackle of static. But you didn't escape. I squeezed my eyes shut. You can still hear me. That means I'm still with you. My stomach twisted, my vision blurred. Then, a noise. A new noise. Not static, not breathing. Something else. Something wet. A slow, slick, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. I pulled the phone away from my ear, but the sound didn't stop. It wasn't coming from the phone anymore. It was inside the bathroom, with me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My back was pressed against the wall. The dragging sound came closer. Something shifting, sliding, the soft tap of something brushing against tile. And then, a knock on the bathroom door. I bit down on my fist to keep from screaming. The knock came again. Software, gentle, just like before. Then, a whisper. Open the door. Tears burned in my eyes. My whole body was shaking. I reached for my phone, fumbled to end the recording, and that's when I saw it. The timestamp. I thought it was a 9-hour recording. I thought it started when I left the apartment. I was wrong. It was still recording. The file was still playing. And the timestamp? It was at 000001. It had just started. Something slammed into the bathroom door. I screamed. The entire room shook. The door frame rattled violently. And then, the handle turned. Not fast. Slow. Click. Click. I threw myself at the door, bracing my whole weight against it. My legs burned. My chest ached. The handle kept turning, pulling against my grip. The whispering grew louder. Too many voices now. Not just one. Hundreds. All whispering the same thing. Listen. Open. Listen. Open. Listen. Open. I was sobbing. My head was pressed against the wood, my whole body shaking. And then, it stopped. The handle went still. The whispering vanished. Silence. I stayed there for what felt like hours. My breath slowed. My body sagged. Then, finally, I moved. I reached out with trembling fingers and unlocked the door. Slowly, carefully, I pushed it open. The bathroom light flickered. The hallway was empty. Jake's apartment was silent. But as I stepped forward, something crunched under my foot. I looked down. There, right outside the bathroom door, was my laptop. I didn't put it there. I hadn't even brought it with me when I left my apartment. But there it was, and on the screen, a new file, titled Final Episode.mp3. I haven't played it yet. I don't know if I ever will. I left Jake's apartment that night. Haven't gone back. I smashed my phone, left my laptop on the sidewalk, bought a new one, new number, new everything. But none of it matters, because I still hear it. When I'm alone, when I'm falling asleep, when I pass by a dark hallway, or wake up in the middle of the night with my back to the door, I hear it. That same slow, wet, dragging sound. That same soft knock. And worst of all, that voice. Right in my ear. You should have listened. I hacked into a dark web military archive. The file showed a secret NASA experiment from 1994, and my birth certificate was attached. All right. I know how this sounds. Dark web, military archive, NASA experiments. Yeah, it sounds like one of those conspiracy theory deep dives your crazy uncle posts on Facebook. But I swear, this happened to me. And if I suddenly stop posting after this, you'll know why. It started because I was bored. That's how all bad decisions start, right? I was a broke college dropout, living in a tiny apartment in Chicago, working a dead-end IT job, fixing printers for people who didn't know what a USB port was. I'd always been into hacking, not like Hollywood-style, hacking into the Pentagon in 5 minutes kind of thing, but real, slow, methodical security breaches, mostly just for fun. I spent a lot of time on the deep web, not just the edgy stuff. No red rooms, no hitmen, nothing like that. Just forums where people talked about programming, cybersecurity, and occasionally leaked files that the government didn't want public. It was like a digital treasure hunt. That's how I found it. A user named whitestatic_1994 had posted something in a buried thread on a hacker forum. The post was simple. NASA, 1994, Project Anthesis. Government doesn't want you to see this. Access code attached. Good luck. I copied the code, ran a few security checks, and traced the file's location. It was on a military archive server. Now, normally, I wouldn't mess with military stuff. That's the kind of thing that gets you black-bagged at 3 a.m. But this server was old, ancient by cybersecurity standards. No two-factor authentication, no modern firewalls. Almost like they never expected anyone to find it. So, I cracked it. Took me maybe an hour. The file was huge. Hundreds of documents, images, and videos. But one name caught my attention immediately. Experiment subjects, 1994 to 1995. I clicked on it. It was a list of names, birth dates, and locations. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then I scrolled down to a very familiar name. My name. My full legal name. My birth date. My birthplace. I don't know how long I just stared at the screen, but my heart was in my throat. I felt like I was going to throw up. I scrolled further. Next to my name was a status update. Status. Active. Active. I was listed as an active subject in an experiment that took place before I was even born. That's when my internet cut out. I don't mean like my Wi-Fi was acting up. I mean my entire connection died. My VPN shut down. My backup tethering from my phone stopped working. Even my neighbor's Wi-Fi, which I occasionally borrowed, disappeared. Then my laptop screen flickered. A new window opened. It was a live video feed. A dark room. A man sitting in a chair, wearing a black suit. He was completely still. Almost too still. His face was pale, almost like wax. Then, he tilted his head, as if he could see me. The feed cut to black, and then my laptop turned off. I swear to God, I just sat there for maybe 2 minutes, heart pounding so loud, I thought my neighbors could hear it. And then, someone knocked on my door. Not loud, not aggressive, just 2 slow, deliberate knocks. I live on the 5th floor of a shitty apartment complex. No one ever visits me. Not without texting first. I didn't move. Another knock. Then, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. I didn't want to look. I really didn't. But I did. It said, "Do not open the door. Do not leave your apartment. This is your only warning." I don't know how long I sat there, frozen, staring at that message. My phone vibrated again. Another text. "They are still outside." I wanted to throw up. Who was they? How did they know I was about to open the door? Who sent the message? I didn't get to think too long, because my phone vibrated one more time. A picture. It was a blurry, grainy shot of a street, but I recognized it instantly. It was outside my parents' house, and in the corner of the image, barely visible, was a black car. No license plate. Just parked there, waiting. I grabbed my laptop, my phone, my hard drive, everything, and shoved it in my backpack. I wasn't staying here. I didn't know where I was going, but I was not staying here. I peeked through the peephole. Nobody was there. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and ran out the back entrance of my building, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear my own footsteps. I had no idea what I had just found, but I knew, whatever it was, someone didn't want me to see it. I didn't stop running. I didn't look back. I didn't think. I just ran. The cold night air hit my face as I turned into an alley behind my apartment complex. My footsteps echoed against the damp concrete, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. My brain was racing, trying to make sense of what just happened, but nothing about this made sense. I kept checking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone, something, chasing me. But there was nothing, at least not yet. I needed to disappear. Fast. I cut through the alley and onto the main street, keeping my hood up, trying to blend in with the late night crowd. It was Chicago, past midnight, and people were still out. Drunks stumbling out of bars, couples walking home from late dinners, some guy yelling about the government tracking his brainwaves. Just another night in the city. I ducked into a 24-hour Starbucks, my hands shaking as I ordered a black coffee just to have an excuse to sit down. I took a corner seat, back against the wall, facing the entrance. I needed to think. I was listed as an active subject in a NASA experiment from 1994. I was born in 1995. What the hell did that mean? I pulled out my laptop, booted it up, and tried reconnecting to the deep web forums. My internet was still dead. My VPN wouldn't start. My backup phone refused to connect to any network. I was completely cut off. That's when I noticed something. A man sitting near the window. He was wearing a black suit, perfectly pressed, no tie, white dress shirt, crisp and clean. His hair was slicked back, jet black, not a single strand out of place. But his face was wrong. His skin was too pale, like he had never been in the sun. His lips were thin, colorless, and his eyes, I swear to God, his eyes were too dark. Not brown, not black, just like two holes punched into his skull. And he wasn't drinking anything. He was just sitting there, staring at me. I froze. My stomach twisted into knots. My brain screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. It was like he had latched onto me. Then he stood up and started walking toward me. Every muscle in my body screamed, "Run!" But I was frozen. He reached my table, stopped, and placed a folded piece of paper in front of me. His hands were wrong. His fingers were too long, joints slightly out of place, skin stretched too tight over bone. He leaned down, just enough for me to hear him whisper. His voice was empty, like static on an old television. "Do not look any further." And then he turned and walked out of the Starbucks. I sat there, paralyzed, unable to move, unable to breathe. It took me a full minute before I even dared to reach for the paper. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. Inside was a single line of text. "Go home, or we send the next picture." My phone vibrated. I didn't want to look. I knew what it was, but I had to. It was another photo. This time, inside my parents' house, the kitchen. The lights were off, but in the corner of the frame, a figure, a man in a black suit, standing perfectly still, watching. I knocked my coffee over as I bolted out of the Starbucks. I didn't care who saw me. I sprinted down the street, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I needed to warn my parents, but as I reached for my phone to call them, my service came back, and I had 32 missed calls, all from Mom. I hit call. It rang once. She picked up, but she didn't say anything. I could hear breathing, shaky, ragged. Then, in a whisper, "They took your father." The world tilted beneath me. "Mom, what do you mean? Who?" A muffled noise, like she had covered the phone with her hand. A few seconds later, she whispered again. "He's gone, sweetheart. They took him. They said, if you don't stop, they'll take me next." Then, the line went dead. I stood in the middle of the street, my body ice cold, the Starbucks behind me, the city around me, the traffic moving like normal, like the world was still the same. But my world was gone. I'd just lost my dad, and I had no idea where he was, or if he was even still alive. I needed to go home. I booked the first flight back to my hometown, paid in cash, left my laptop behind, burned my hard drive in a trash can behind a Walmart. I wasn't taking any chances. The whole flight, I kept my eyes on the other passengers. Every time I saw a man in a black suit, I felt my pulse spike. I landed at 2 a.m. My mom's house was dark. Too dark. I stepped onto the porch, heart hammering. The door was unlocked. Inside, the living room was a wreck. Couch overturned, picture frames shattered, the TV screen cracked, like someone had smashed it with their fist. And then, I saw it. A mannequin, sitting in my dad's favorite chair. Not a mannequin, a body. But the white skin, it wasn't real. It was like wax. The eyes were fake. The lips didn't move. The face was an exact replica of my father, a perfect, lifeless copy. And in its lap, a folder. I picked it up with shaking hands. Inside was one document, my birth certificate. But the details were wrong. My birth date had been changed. Not 1995, 1994, and under place of birth. It didn't say my hometown. It said NASA facility, Project Anthesis. I dropped the folder. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. Behind me, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway. I turned, heart pounding so hard, it felt like my ribs would crack. And there, standing in the dark, was a man in a black suit. Except this time, his face was my father's, but his eyes were still empty. And then, he smiled. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing wearing my father's face took a step forward, slow, careful, deliberate, like it was studying me, like it was waiting for something. The skin was too perfect, the seams where flesh should crease, too smooth, like wax, like plastic. The smile on its face was wrong, too wide. The lips didn't move naturally, just stretched, like the muscles underneath weren't human. My dad had green eyes. This thing's eyes were black, completely black. No whites, no pupils, just empty sockets filled with a darkness that swallowed the light. It took another step. My legs finally listened to me. I ran. I bolted down the hallway, almost slipping on the overturned furniture, crashing into walls as I sprinted toward the back door. My mom. Where was my mom? I reached for my phone, hands shaking, but I never got the chance to call, because the back door was open, and outside, standing perfectly still in the dark, was another man in a black suit. Not another man, another version of my father. This one had the same blank black eyes, the same waxy synthetic skin, the same unmoving smile. He stood directly in the yard, hands at his sides, watching me. The one behind me moved closer. I felt the floorboards shift with its weight. My brain was screaming. My body was frozen between two identical, unnatural copies of the man who raised me. Then, they spoke. At the same time. The voices weren't right. They were too flat, too empty, like a recording, playing backwards without understanding them. You were never meant to see this. The words scraped against my skull. Something about the way they spoke. Inhuman. Like it wasn't just the wrong voice, but the wrong kind of intelligence. Like they were pretending to be human. I ran. I didn't think. I just ran. I sprinted through the house, crashing through furniture, knocking over a lamp as I scrambled toward the front door. I didn't care if they were behind me. I didn't care if they were waiting outside. I needed to get out of this house. My foot caught on something. I tripped, hit the floor hard. Pain shot up my arm. My head cracked against the tile. For a moment, I saw static, like my vision glitched. And then, something grabbed my ankle. Cold, hard, too strong. I screamed. I kicked, hard, but the grip didn't loosen. It was dragging me, pulling me back into the dark hallway. My nails scraped against the floor as I struggled, gasping, thrashing, kicking wildly at whatever had me. And then, it spoke again. We let you live to see if you would forget. I saw its face. Up close, the illusion was worse. The skin, too smooth. The eyes, too empty. The teeth, too white, like they were all exactly the same, perfectly aligned, uniform, manufactured. This thing wasn't a person. It wasn't anything human. I lashed out, my foot connecting with its jaw. The head snapped back at a sickening angle, but it didn't let go. Then, a gunshot. The grip on my ankle loosened. The thing's body jerked violently as a hole appeared in the center of its forehead, but no blood came out. Another shot, this time into its chest. It collapsed. I scrambled backward, my breath ragged, vision swimming. And then I saw him, a man in tactical gear, face covered in a black balaclava, holding a silenced pistol. He grabbed me hard, pulled me to my feet. His voice was sharp. "If you want to live, you come with me. Now." I should have asked questions. I should have demanded answers. But I didn't, because behind him, the thing with my father's face was getting back up. I ran with him. We cut through the yard, through the neighbor's driveway, across the street, into a dark alley. My lungs burned, my vision blurred, my head still throbbing from the fall, but I didn't stop. We ran until we reached a black SUV. He shoved me inside, slammed the door, and jumped into the driver's seat. The tires screeched as we sped off. I couldn't speak. I couldn't think. Finally, I managed to choke out a single word. "Who?" He didn't look at me, just kept driving. Fast. Too fast. "You weren't supposed to find that file." My stomach dropped. "Who are they?" I whispered. For the first time, he glanced at me in the rearview mirror, and I'll never forget the look in his eyes. Pure, hollow fear. "You don't understand." He gripped the wheel tighter. "They are not people." I swallowed, my throat dry. "Then what the hell are they?" A long silence. The city lights flashed by outside. Then, in a low, broken voice, "They are the ones who made you." Everything inside me froze. My blood turned to ice. I stared at him, my heart pounding out of my chest. What the hell does that mean? No answer. I felt like I was going to be sick. I looked at my hands, my skin, my reflection in the side mirror. I felt my own pulse. I was alive. I was real. Right? I wanted to scream. I wanted to deny everything. But then, my phone vibrated. I pulled it out, hesitating, already knowing what I'd see. Another picture. This time, inside the SUV. A grainy black and white image. A live feed. From right above us. I barely had time to react. The car in front of us slammed its brakes. My driver cursed, swerving violently to avoid the crash. And then I saw them. 4 black-suited figures, standing in the middle of the road, waiting. My driver grabbed my arm. "Listen to me!" Something smashed into the SUV. The world spun. Glass shattered. I hit my head, and everything went dark. I woke up to the sound of metal creaking, a deep, metallic groan, like something huge, bending, breaking, warping. My vision swam. Everything was wrong. I was upside down. For a second, I couldn't even process what had happened. My head was throbbing, my ribs felt crushed, and my right arm was twisted at a sickening angle against my chest. My mouth was filled with the sharp taste of blood and gasoline. The SUV was totaled. Glass shards floated in the air around me, frozen in time, suspended. Wait, number. They weren't floating. They were stuck, like reality itself had glitched. I tried to move. Pain shot up my spine, hot and electric, making me gasp. I heard my own bones pop back into place as I shifted. Too fast, too smooth, like my body wasn't even mine anymore. And then I remembered. The black suits, the crash, the man in the driver's seat. I turned my head, the world tilting at an unnatural angle. He was gone. The seat was empty. Blood smeared the dashboard, his gun still clutched in the fingers of a severed hand. I should have screamed, but something inside me was changing. Something deep, buried under my skin, was waking up. I felt it, crawling through my bones like static electricity. A glitch in my own existence, an error scratching at the edges of my brain. I looked at my arm, the one that had been broken. It wasn't broken anymore. I had watched it reset itself, and then I heard it. Footsteps, right outside the car, slow, rhythmic, like they weren't walking, they were waiting between each step. I didn't breathe. The SUV was crushed metal, twisted beyond recognition, but somehow the air inside felt thick, claustrophobic. A shadow moved past the broken windshield. One of them. It stopped. I saw its feet, polished black shoes, too clean, too perfect. The suit was flawless, not a speck of dust, not a wrinkle. Like it wasn't even fabric, like it was part of its skin. I could feel it looking at me, even though I couldn't see its face. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The thing tilted its head. I heard the vertebrae in its neck shift, like a machine resetting itself. Then, in my own voice, it spoke. "I see you." I almost vomited, not because of what it said, but because of how wrong it sounded. It wasn't mimicking me. It wasn't copying my voice. It was stealing it. It was like I had just heard my own soul echo back at me from something that wasn't human. And then, it bent down. I saw its face, and my entire world broke. It was me. A perfect, identical version of me. Same hair, same jawline, same scar above my eyebrow from when I fell off my bike as a kid. But the eyes were black, just like my father's copy. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt my mind snap. This wasn't some government experiment. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was something else. Something older. Something inhuman. The thing wearing my face reached for me. I moved before I could think. I grabbed the severed hand off the dashboard, ripped the gun from its stiff fingers, and fired. Point blank. Straight into its face. The head snapped back, violently. A gaping hole tore through its skull, but there was no blood, just a black, oil-like substance, dripping like ink onto the crushed roof of the SUV. It stood there, twitching, shaking. Then, slowly, it straightened its neck. The hole in its face began to close, like a wound reversing itself. I fired again, and again. Nothing worked. It just kept resetting. The thing let out a sound, something between static and laughter. Then it spoke again, this time in my father's voice. "You can't kill what was never alive." I lost it. I twisted my body, ignoring the pain, and kicked the door open with inhuman strength. It flew off its hinges, skidding across the pavement. I ran. I ran like I had never run before. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. The city was wrong. The streetlights flickered like a bad signal. Buildings shifted when I wasn't looking. Faces in the crowd were blurry, pixelated, like corrupted images. I was in a place I had lived my whole life, but it wasn't real anymore. Nothing was real anymore. I turned a corner, slammed into someone. A hand clamped over my mouth before I could scream. I struggled, but then I saw his face. Not a black suit, not a copy, just a man. Wide, terrified eyes, scruffy beard. Real. He whispered, voice shaking. "You need to come with me. Now, before they finish replacing you." Before I could even speak, he grabbed my arm and dragged me into an alley. I barely caught my breath before he pushed open a rusted metal door and pulled me into what looked like a makeshift bunker. Concrete walls, stacks of monitors showing glitching surveillance footage, wires hanging from the ceiling, maps with red strings connecting places I couldn't understand, and in the center, a screen, a paused video. The thumbnail made my stomach drop. It was an old NASA facility, the same one listed on my birth certificate. The man locked the door behind us, panting. He turned to me, gripping my shoulders. His eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen since this nightmare started. Pure, human terror. Then he said something that shattered what little reality I had left. I know what you are. I know what they did. And I know how to stop it. He took a deep breath. Then he hit play. The video started. The date, 1994. The camera panned across a lab, showing something covered in a sheet. Scientists stood around it, their faces blurred, distorted, like the footage itself was rejecting their existence. Then, a hand, my hand, emerging from underneath the sheet, reaching, moving, alive, and a voice from behind the camera whispered, "Subject 035 has woken up." The screen cut to black. I stumbled back, my breath ragged. The man looked me in the eye and said the words I never wanted to hear. "You were never born. You were made." And outside, the sound of footsteps. The footsteps outside the bunker stopped. The air went dead, too silent, like even the world outside was holding its breath. I could feel them, the black suits, standing just beyond the door, waiting, listening. They weren't human, and neither was I. The man who had dragged me into this bunker, he was staring at me now. His breath was shallow, his face slick with sweat. I could tell he was terrified of me, of what I was. I felt my fingers twitch, my skin buzzing with something wrong, like static underneath my flesh, like a glitch trying to rewrite itself. The man swallowed hard. He gestured toward the screen, the paused video of me, waking up in 1994. "You don't remember, do you?" His voice was shaking. I didn't answer, because he was right. I had memories, a childhood, parents, a life. But now, every time I tried to recall something specific, the edges blurred, the details didn't fit together, like puzzle pieces that weren't meant to connect. The more I thought about it, the more the gaps spread, like a computer file being corrupted. I felt my stomach churn. I gripped my arms to stop the shaking, but even that felt unnatural. The man stepped closer. His eyes were desperate, searching my face. "Listen to me. You were created. You were never supposed to leave that facility. But something..." He hesitated. "Something went wrong. The project was shut down, but instead of erasing you, they tried to place you into a normal life." The words hit me like a truck. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. My whole life was a lie. The birthdays, the childhood memories, the people I thought I knew, all fabricated. I clutched my chest. My heartbeat was too fast, too strong, like an engine revving too hard, about to break. I was malfunctioning. The man didn't stop. He couldn't. They replaced your family, your entire history. They had to, because you were never supposed to exist outside of that lab. He reached behind him, grabbed a stack of documents, and threw them in front of me. Files, medical reports, photos. I forced myself to look. The first image was a corpse. A woman, her face frozen in horror, her eyes missing. The caption underneath made my vision blur. Subject, mother, terminated. I flipped to the next page with trembling fingers. A burned out house. Caption, subject hometown, liquidated. Then the next one. A boy, maybe 5 or 6, staring blankly at the camera. The hair, the nose, the face. It was me. Except it wasn't. The caption, 035-original-decommissioned. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't breathe. I staggered back, my head pounding, my skin crawling. There was another me, an original version, and it had been killed. I gripped the table, my vision glitching. I could hear my own heartbeat, too loud, too unnatural. A thought pushed into my mind, uninvited, unwelcome, but I couldn't stop it. If the original me was killed, then what the hell was I? The man was watching me, his fingers twitching near his gun. He thought I was going to snap, and maybe I was, because something inside me was waking up, something they tried to bury, something I wasn't supposed to remember. And then, the bunker door creaked. Not a knock, not a slam, just a slow, careful push. The man's face went white. He grabbed his gun, aimed at the entrance. It's them! My stomach twisted. Number, not them, not just them. I felt it before I saw it. Something bigger, older, more wrong than anything else. The lights flickered. The air grew thick, suffocating. And then, they stepped inside. Not just the black suits. Something else. Something that had been waiting for me to wake up. They stood there, perfectly still. A row of identical men in black, their empty eyes locking onto me. But behind them, the darkness moved. The shadows unfolded. A shape stepped forward. I didn't have words for what I saw. It wasn't a man. It was something imitating one. Tall, stretched too thin, its limbs not connected by bones, but by something shifting underneath. Its face, if you could even call it a face, was a blur, like it couldn't decide what to be. But the worst part was that I recognized it. A memory I never knew I had surfaced. A laboratory, a room filled with tanks, and this thing, standing over me, watching, like a creator admiring its work. My body locked up. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. It spoke without speaking. Its voice crawled inside my skull like static through a broken radio. We have come to collect what is ours. The man beside me fired his gun. The bullet never reached them. It froze in mid-air. Then, it reversed. The bullet shot back into his own skull, a perfect hole between his eyes. He collapsed without a sound. I choked on my breath. My pulse was a drumbeat of terror, hammering inside my skull. I wasn't supposed to survive this. I wasn't even supposed to exist. The thing in the dark stepped closer. Its mouth split open, too wide, too deep. And I finally understood. I wasn't a person. I wasn't human. I was an echo, a failed attempt to make something that should never have been made. And now, they had come to erase the mistake. I clenched my fists. The static in my skin screamed. They wanted to take me back. Number. They would have to kill me first. I turned. I ran. But this time, I didn't run from them. I ran toward them. And as I moved, I felt it. The glitch in my body breaking free. For the first time, I wasn't scared. For the first time, I felt like what I was meant to be. Something they couldn't control. Something they couldn't stop. And as I collided with the darkness, I started to remember.